chapter 8, verses 5 through 13. Chapter 8, verses 5 through 13. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking for help. "Lord," he said, "my servant lies at home, paralyzed, suffering terribly." Jesus said to him, "Shall I come and heal him?" The centurion replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but only say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes. And I tell that one, 'Come,' and he comes. And I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. He was amazed and said to those following him, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I tell you that many will come from the east and the west and take their places at the feast of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, let it be done, just as you believed it would be." And his servant was healed at that moment. I'm going to do a couple-part series on Gentiles in the Gospels. And so this is it's presumably Roman centurion. The next time I'm going to be doing Simeon, who carried the cross, who was African, and explaining some of the implications of that for fusion. This particular man, the centurion, was a man by definition. Centurion has the word century in it, where we get the word 100. And so he was in charge of, guess how many men? 100 men. So he wasn't the top dog, but he would be more like a captain in the military. There were, of course, generals, the equivalent of generals, who were in charge of a legion. A legion was 1,600 men. So he was 1/16 of a legion that he was in charge of. That's where he says, "I am a man under authority, but I have soldiers and servants under me." So he was like a captain. And there's something about a military guy that you can spot them right away. And we could say that people have different backgrounds that have been in the military, whether it be John Prue, whether it be Colin Powell, or people who started their careers in the military and then went on to other things. But they have a certain way about them. They have a certain mechanicalness to them, right? They work in a framework, in structure. You can't have an army and just say, let's just get a whole bunch of guys together and, we'll just fight a war here, or we'll defend our country. There has to be organization and structure. And so this particular centurion, he was part of this army that was the greatest army ever. They conquered the entire known world at that time. They were all the way in Europe and Africa and Asia Minor. They were all over the place. And he was one of their soldiers. And so what we're going to come across here is that this guy grows up, and we're going to really see what kind of heart and faith he has, even though he was a battle-tested man. And that's an encouragement to all of us, no matter where you came from, no matter where you're, even Lowell, that nice flowers can come up and grow up in Lowell. Like this centurion. Seems like an unlikely hero, an unlikely person to be spoken about. And yet that's what happens. He comes up, first of all, the centurion comes to Jesus, and he asks for help. Now, the thing about asking for help is that I've heard many people complain about God in their life, and God didn't do this, and why was he here or there? And a very simple thing would be, did you ask him for help? Have you asked him for help in this situation? Have you prayed to him on a regular basis for this situation? The Bible says you have not because you ask not. Now, I know that people abuse this and say if you ask, you should get everything you want, and that's not what the Bible says. But it does say you have not because you ask not. Now, I have a story with this. I was away in Tampa watching the Patriots and the Bucks play, and then we went to the hotel afterwards, and Justice and I were checking in at 1 o'clock in the morning. Rotar was there. He's my witness. And the guy, it was just a middle-aged guy at the desk, and he just said, I cannot confirm or deny that in the room right next door, right over there, is Tony Romo, Bill Cowher, Steve Smith, Marshall Faulk, bop, bop, bop. I'm not going to say they're there. I'm not going to say they're not there. That room right over there. Really? Justice says to me, Dad, hands me his football. Can you go ask them for my autograph? Their autographs? I said, Justice, there's a 0.0% chance they're going to let a 52-year-old guy in that room with a football to sign it. And the Bible says you have not because you ask not. So you go in there and ask them. I have to throw this side note in. There was a guy with a Green Bay shirt. Alcohol may have been a factor, and he cut in while I'm teaching my son the Bible and said, I'm from Wisconsin, and Tony Romo's from Wisconsin. I'll go talk to him. I just said, no thanks. Next time you should dress up as a clown. But, so back to the story. I just said, if you want it, you ask them for it. There was kind of a scowling lady that worked at the hotel. I knew that because when I went to take a picture, she said, no pictures, get out of here. But he kind of, walked right by her. She just let him go. And then he was escorted right to the table where they all were. And not only did they all sign the football, but they had a 5-minute conversation with him. And they all showed themselves. Just humility. Tony Romo said, this guy needs to sign your autograph. He's best friends with you-know-who. And Justice is like, who? And Romo's giggling. He's on your jersey. His number. Oh, Tom Brady? Okay. And then Steve Smith, if any of you know football, and I don't like to talk about sports because I know half of you don't know who I'm talking about, took Justice and shook his hand and shook him to the bone. I said, well, that's how he played. I made him watch a 30 for 30 last night on Steve Smith to understand it. But he was thrilled. He was thrilled. But the one thing is what were the chances that football was going to be signed if he didn't go in there and ask? 0. There wasn't this thing where he could just magically have the thing end up there and the whole experience wouldn't have been that way. So we have a situation where this Roman centurion, who was known for, their people at that point were known for complete paganism, idol worship, worshiping things that hands had made, all this Zeus and Apollo, stuff like that. What does he do? But he goes to Jesus. He goes to Jesus. And look what he says. He starts out. What's the first thing here? What's the first word? Lord. If you've ever been in the military, they're not given to use their first Christian names now, are they? Imagine being a new recruit at boot camp and going, hey, what's up, Jack? Hey, what's up, Joe? To the sergeant, the drill sergeant. How's that going to work for you, first name basis? They're going to, make them do some push-ups or something. So he starts right away with Lord. My servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly. Now, most cases of paralysis due to stroke have no pain associated with them. If you have a stroke in the part of your brain that allows you to move your left arm dies, you just can't move your left arm. You also can't feel any pain in your left arm. So this servant didn't have a stroke. But there are other things that can result in that type of a situation where you can't move it and you have severe pain, such as a herniated disc. You can herniate a disc where it pinches a peripheral nerve. You can develop paralysis, and you at the same time can be in excruciating pain. But this idea sounds like even worse than a herniated disc, because it says, my servant lies at home, paralyzed. So you have to picture the centurion couldn't realistically bring him, and the servant couldn't come with him. And we have people who are essentially paralyzed by sin that we've got to bring Jesus to them. They can't get to Jesus themselves. And so, my servant lies at home paralyzed. Now, there was a very common thing in the ancient world that we take for granted that we don't see, except for wacky people that don't want to vaccinate their kids. I'll talk about that someday. But it was called tetanus. Now, we all think about it. We get a little scrape, and we need to be vaccinated with the tetanus shot. What happened in the ancient world is tetanus is everywhere. It's all over. You can go out in the back there and dig it up right now. And it would, if you cut your skin or something like that, this germ will get into your body, just in the slightest of a cut. And when it gets into your body, what it does is it spreads through your whole body, and it forces all your muscles to contract. Well, we have opposing muscles here. We have a bicep, small, tricep. We should have, where's Jeremy today? We should have somebody show us these. But what happens is when your bicep and your tricep both go their strongest. What's overwhelmingly a stronger muscle, your bicep or your tricep? Triceps are much stronger than your biceps, except for those beach guys. So what happens to somebody that has lockjaw is the biceps are trying as hard as they can, and the triceps are trying as hard as they can, and the arms completely extend. Okay? And what's stronger, your ab muscles or your back? Back. Okay? And this is, what about your face, your jaw? Is it stronger to open your jaw or close your jaw? My kids tell me that you can hold an alligator's jaw closed with 2 fingers. I don't want to try to find out, but I guess the idea is the muscles to close are so much stronger than the muscles to open. So the same with the jaw. Obviously, to close our jaw is so much stronger than to open it. That when tetanus sets in, all the muscles clench up and the stronger ones win, and they get this tightened face. They're tight, they're stiff, and they're in agony. They can't stop. And ultimately, they die of what? Suffocation. They can't breathe. And it's an agonizing death. So you have to picture this type of a situation where somebody is like that. This still happens today, and this happens in people who don't think that their kids should be vaccinated. Anyway, they themselves have been vaccinated, of course, but they don't want their kids vaccinated. So here we go. Jesus said to them, "Shall I come and heal them?" I don't like to get into this, but really what Jesus says is, "I will go and heal him." He doesn't ask a question there, okay? In all the other translations, you'll see that. Now, the word that he uses for heal him is a Greek word where we get the word therapy. And the word therapy came from, this is a weaker word. It's a weaker word in the sense of, no offense to therapists, but what the idea is that in that society, there would be doctors that would be, or healing people that would be attendants to people who are soldiers or wealthy people. Alexander the Great had his best friend that would provide him with medicines after war, after battle, much like an athlete has trainers that will help them. In those days, the people who were wealthy could afford to have these people. What they had access to back then, I don't know. They didn't even have a bag of ice. Just thinking about that when I'm preparing this, it wasn't like they could even get ice. They lived in the Middle East. They didn't have refrigerators for at least a couple years. And if they had one, they couldn't plug it in because they didn't have electricity, and on it goes. So back to the story here. He was basically saying, do you want me to do therapy? Do you want me to come and touch him and work on him? And this is something that's lost in translation, is that when the centurion replies, he doesn't use the therapy word. He doesn't say, oh yeah, sure, come and do some therapy, or I'm not worthy for that. He says, I want him to be healed. Different word, Greek word, which means supernatural healing, please. That's what I want. He needs supernatural healing. He needs something that's so much stronger than therapy, than this gradual process. Just do that supernatural thing, Jesus. It's a word that particularly brings attention to the Lord as the great physician. And that's when it's used in the Bible. But he's the first one to use the word. He's not only the first one to use it. In the Gospel of Matthew, we're 8 chapters in, and do you know this is the first time the word faith is used in the Gospel of Matthew, is right here? We're 8 chapters in, and we're finally getting to the word faith. And who is it used for but this centurion? It's the first time Jesus uses the word faith. And so let's get back to it. The centurion replies, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. Those of you who are in the ancient faith traditions or were raised in that or still are in that, know that that was what was used for the Lord's Supper before somebody would receive the Lord's Supper. You would say, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the word and thy servant shall be healed. So that's still used today. And these were from this centurion right here. The context of this is that the centurion is acknowledging that he doesn't feel like he is worthy to go and have Jesus come into his life and to come into his home. He just says, no, 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 no. Who am I for you to come here? And so this is where the first big point that I have is that, and this is worth remembering, that faith, true faith, faith that amazes Jesus, is an emptying virtue. Faith is an emptying virtue. What does that mean? It means that unlike today in society and in TVs where people say, I've got so much faith. I'm so full of faith. It's about me. I'm bouncing with faith. That's not at all what you see with this centurion. What you see is this emptiness that faith creates in him. You know, I am all hell and you are all heaven. I am just a man, but you are so much more. I am so little and you are so big. I must decrease and you must increase. That's the real faith. That's true faith. Any faith that makes you think you're better than somebody else, makes you think that God is waiting on you, makes you think that you have some little pet God that you can pat on the head, has nothing to do with this faith. Any faith that makes you smaller and God bigger, any faith that makes you more dependent on him and less dependent on yourself is real faith. That is what faith is. Now we understand here that there's this sense of unworthiness that he has. There may have also been a sense of urgency. When he went, by the time he got to Jesus, and he may have seen this disease before. He may know that he's going to die soon. We know that when Jesus tarried in the story of Lazarus, that Lazarus died. And so there may have also been this sense of, we don't have time for this. But it was interesting how people, we do well to time the onset of things. That's Sir Francis Bacon. And what that means is, it's good if you notice the beginning of something, the beginning of a problem. This is an awful story that God bless the people in Santa Ana that are dealing with the fire. But one of the victims, his whole family escaped and lived, but the reason he didn't live was that when they said, we have to get out right now, He said, their car was running. They were all getting in the car. He said, I want to take my new red truck, and I can't find the keys. And the fire was going 50 miles an hour, and they all lived, and he died. And so it's terrible. This is what I mean about things, that there's sometimes missed opportunities. There's things that happen with hesitation, with procrastination, with just not understanding the urgency of a situation or minimizing this. I can remember, we were at Thanksgiving, and this is years ago, and my brother's father-in-law reached over to get something, and his sweater caught on fire. And this is just a different reaction. Kind of people, some people are frozen. One person, just when it was just a little thing, somebody kind of giggled a little, like, oh. And then, you know what happened. I mean, in like 2 seconds, that thing was all the way up his arm. And it's like someone choking, And there's no time here. And, I jumped out of my chair, ripped the sweater off him, and stomped on it. And, we sat down 2 seconds later. But you can't, it's not a, this is the type of thing that's like that. And I think that those are just physical levels. How much more on a spiritual basis? When somebody gets involved in sin, somebody gets involved with something in their life that they know is destroying them, and there's a very lackadaisical, very slow, very unintentional attempt to rescue that person. Back to the story. Again, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed. The thing that I had the hardest time wrapping my mind around in my spirit in this story was that I was amazed that Jesus was amazed. I was surprised that Jesus was amazed. I looked up the word. It means awestruck, astonished out of one's senses. It blew his mind. Jesus was amazed. He was surprised. To be surprised means you didn't have to, there's no surprise if you have foreknowledge. And you say, well, how could Jesus not have foreknowledge? He's God. Well, look, this gets complicated, but he restricted himself when he was a man. He restricted himself so that he was surprised by this. The interesting thing, it doesn't just mean to be astonished. It means astonished, which leads one to investigate the cause. Jesus was so surprised, he was astonished because the man said, look, I'm not worthy to have you here, but you just say the word and he'll be healed. Because I have servants and I have soldiers under me, and I say go and I say come, and they do it. And Jesus was amazed. Some parents here would be amazed if their children just did what we told them to do. We'd be astonished. But here it is. This is again a situation where we see faith. We see Jesus responding to that faith with amazement. Then he does something. What Jesus does is, he doesn't just say, okay, you're healed, he's healed, but he turns to the followers and he speaks to them. Not to the centurion, but to the followers. But he didn't really just speak to them, those who were following him then, just right there. But isn't he also speaking to us? How could I describe this? When I was in fellowship, I was in my final years of training to be a vascular surgeon. My final years. And there was a mentor, a guy named Bandick. We just called him Bandick, Dr. Bandick, who used to bring me into the office when he would see the patients. And I used to sit in the corner, and I almost never said one thing or asked a question or said anything. And so he would examine the patient, and without fail, on every single patient ever, he used to explain to the patient what their problem was or something, and he used to talk to them. And at the beginning of the conversation, he was explaining things to them on their level so they could understand things. But every time, without fail, at the end of it, he would tell them something that they didn't have a prayer to understand that was really for what? For my benefit. So he would, if Evelyn's the patient and I'm Bandic and, over here is Angie and that's me, she might start out and say, this varicose vein in your leg developed because of some bad valves, and we can do a procedure to fix that for you. And you have a particular situation where you have some tortuosity at the top of your vein, which is going to make you at higher risk of having a stump that we'll have to take care of later, so you might need 2 procedures. There's always a nugget. There's always something for me there just because I'm in the room. And this is what Jesus was doing. He was amazed by this centurion, but he's thinking 2,000 years ahead. He over-answers. He over-answers. Those of us who are teachers, hopefully I don't over-preach today. Over-teach, over-coach. He says this, he was amazed and said to those following him, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." Wow. Wow. Never met anybody like this guy. Nobody. John the Baptist, you name it. Nobody with as much faith as this guy. That means you guys, Peter, Paul, Mary, all them. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob at the kingdom of heaven. This is mind-blowing to these people. That what he's saying is, those of us who are not Jewish descent, that the kingdom of heaven is going to be open to us. That may be all of us here or most of us here. That we will actually have a seat at the table of the kingdom of heaven based on faith. And that many will come. Not maybe, not someday. And now he's speaking to us. He's saying they'll take their seats at the table. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness. So the idea here is that you have a banquet. When they're talking about a table and sit at the table, they're not speaking about a chair like what you're sitting in. They're speaking about reclining. And that's how the Jews ate. That's how the Romans ate. They would recline. I'm not going to get down and lay down, but you can kind of picture like that. You might be watching TV that way, or just kind of, it's a real relaxed situation. And it's saying that many people will come, and they'll be there, and they'll be reclining. And it won't just be those who you think are going to be there. And they'll take their seats, as it will. They'll take their places. And so my second big point here, this is from St. Bernard, one of the early church fathers, is that it says about the Lord that he puts the oil of his mercy in the vase of our trust. So what it is that this centurion came to him with an empty vase, a big empty vase, of saying, I have a huge problem, you're the only one that can help. And because he had a big vase, and because the vase was empty, remember, it's an emptying virtue, the Lord could put so much oil, so much mercy. He could fill it so much. We have not because we ask not. We can't possibly be filled with his mercy when we come to him. You can't come to him with a thimble of trust and be overflowed with his love and mercy. How much can he put in there? How much can he put in there? It's the old story of the Asian monk who comes to the beggar on the road. He has a whole sack of grain, rice grain, from just harvesting it. And the beggar says, please, I'm starving. Share of your bounty here. And one grain of rice is taken out of the sack and handed to the beggar. And then what happens but boom, he dies. Right that moment. And he's before God. And God says, pour it out. And he pours out his huge sack of rice, which is all just dust. And in there is one kernel of gold. Just one kernel. That's it. And so it is with us. Where are we with our trust in God? Where are we with our faith? Are we emptied? Sure, we have a decent-sized vase, but the decent-sized vase is full of all this stuff. All our legalism, all our religiosity, all our conditions, all our own preconceived notions of him, things that he can't put anything into. Or we bring him a vase that's got holes in it. We don't give him the best. We give him some cracked thing. He puts the oil of his mercy. Just say that this week as you're going around and you're talking to him. Lord, just fill me with the oil of your mercy in the vase of my trust. If you say, but I just have so little trust, then just like the person in another place who said, help me in my unbelief. Give me more trust for you. Give me more trust to see you day to day in situations. There's a big idea in this story. It's kind of like a Bible study, but I'm going to go back to something here. This at the very beginning when the soldier says, this servant of mine is suffering terribly. The word suffering terribly in the Greek comes from the word where we get what's called a Lydian touchstone, a Lydian stone. Anyone know what a touchstone is? A touchstone was used in ancient times and is still used today. There was a particular type of stone that was used to determine whether gold was genuine. And the way they would do it is they would take the stone and they would take a piece of gold and they would rub the article of jewelry, the gold or the stone, on the touchstone. And a particular mark was left on the stone if it was gold. And now they've got it down to they can even tell whether it's 10 karat or 14 karat based on the particular colors and marks and chemical reaction. And so when the Roman soldier was saying, my servant is suffering terribly, the word is that he was saying, he is a Lydian stone. He is a touchstone. This is a test. This is a test, God. I know it's a test. We see his heart, that you can just tell that he cares about this person. I mean, all of us have had bosses that don't give a crap about us. You can see he cares about him. He's going out of his way. This is a test, God. That's huge faith right there. Now, we know what happens with so many words in English are the same way. They start as metaphors. They're metaphors that ultimately sometimes get lost in the word, and all that's left is what the word means. But I don't think that the Lord makes mistakes, and so this is what the word is that he said. He's a touchstone. He's a test. This is a test of my faith. I myself, with my neck, 4 years ago, I felt something pop in my neck. I developed pretty significant pain in my left arm within a few hours and then in a few days. Over the period of a few weeks, despite different types of traction and medication and cold and heat, I went from pain to excruciating pain. I couldn't sleep at night. The only position where I got any relief at all was to sit like this with my arm hanging down. How many hours a day can you do that? And I saw a doctor who said, just give it time, it'll get better. Usually does. And in a couple of weeks, not only did it not get better, but I went to work one day, and a couple hours into work, all of a sudden, I couldn't lift my left arm. It was in excruciating pain. I couldn't feel my fingers. I would have, if somebody said, there's nothing left to do, there's a saw here, and you just either live with it for your life or cut your arm off, I would have easily cut my arm off. No question about it. I know that sounds like, I absolutely would have just sawed my arm off right there. Just give me the saw. I know I could have done it because it couldn't be worse than the pain I had all the time. And there was this feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't, you need your two hands to be a surgeon. And is this going to come back? And I tried the therapy. But in the end, I needed the complete cure. You see? And yet there was this thing happening inside of me where I was really, really, as it was when my wife was sick, or certain times that I was really being broken down by God and really understanding something about pain. And I was studying. And every day there was one verse that I had in my heart all the time, which was that my grace is sufficient for thee, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And having that verse from where Paul is talking about taking the thorn away, and the Lord just said, no, not yet, or not now. And when at the same time I was reading Spurgeon's Morning and Evening. And you can check it out because it was, I think, March 4th. You could probably cross-reference and check me on this. That when I read that morning, a different verse and a little meditation, that morning of March 4th, when I completely lost use of my arm, where I ultimately then had an emergency MRI, where I went to the emergency room, which I'll get to, and ultimately had surgery that night. That was the Bible verse that morning. I just opened it up, and it was that verse that I was meditating on for weeks that kept me and sustained me. And there it was, and I said, Lord, something's going to happen today, because here it is, that verse. But I went in, when I went to the emergency room, this is exactly how it happened. I had a jacket on. It was March. It was a cold day. And this is no knock on this one particular person, but they asked me to take my jacket off so they could check my blood pressure. And I tried to get it off, and I got myself stuck because my arm was paralyzed, and I got my other arm stuck at my elbow. And I'm in excruciating pain. And the person checking me in hasn't looked at me the whole time I've been there. And as I'm completely stuck, I say, I'm stuck. I can't get this off of me. And just kind of doesn't really look up and just pushes the side down. And the first question is, what pills are you taking? Oh, I'm not taking any pills. I haven't taken anything. How many years have you had a neck problem for? Oh, I haven't had a neck problem for years. Why are you here? I'm here because I can't lift my left arm. The line of questioning was, I know you're here because you want narcotics and you're a drug addict, and I am so sick of people like you. Boy, I really needed a healer, and I got a real dose of somebody that was not in the tune with things. The head neurosurgeon met me at the emergency room and called my name, and the person that was checking me in jumped up and looked at me for the first time and said, "Are you Dr. Gonsalves?" I said, "Yeah, I'm the same guy. Still me." And they just brought me right in and rushed me up to the OR. I can lift my left arm. I still can do surgery. And I can tell you that we are all Lydian stones. We all have things that we suffer, things that we experience. But God wants to use us, to scratch us, to be able to see what's real gold and what's real. And that's what he did with this Roman centurion. And 2,000 years ago when he met Jesus, and it's been about 2,000 years now, hasn't it? Because you figure it was about within, give or take, 10 years. And what do we have here? But we have a time where we're going to celebrate the Lord's Supper and communion. And what I would just say to you is that, you're free to celebrate this. If you are a believer in Jesus here, you don't have to be a member here. But one thing I would do is just in your own heart, just be like the Roman centurion and just say, "Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the word, and I shall be healed." Just repeat that in your heart, in your spirit, when you share in his body and when you share in his blood. You see, on the night that Jesus died and when he was betrayed, it was the same, the night before he died and the night that he was betrayed. He took bread, he broke it, and he gave it to his friends and said, "Take and eat. Do this in remembrance of me. This is my body." And then he took the cup and he said, "Drink of this. This is my blood. Do this in remembrance of me." And so we've made a point of making sure that we're very regularly celebrating this because he told us to do it. He told us to do it, so we're doing it. And I know, again, people dispute, what does it mean, what doesn't it mean? That's not something we get into here. Take and eat. Don't take and understand. And as I said, feel free to say, "Lord, I am not worthy to receive you. I'm just a touchstone. But you show yourself. You show your glory. I bring you an empty vase. Bring one huge, like the widow of Elisha that never ran out for a year. Come with your emptiness. Offer that to him."